Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, I am happy to say that we have finally caught up with these videos of Countdown to Kickoff. Now, in a way, we sort of caught up even more because between USC and this upcoming episode of UCLA versus Oregon, there was a bye week. So technically, UCLA is taking place in week 6 of the season, and technically we are 7 weeks left to football season, which means that we should be in week 5, but since there's a bye week, we're heading on to week 6 as we approach 7 weeks until the entire college football season happens anyway. So we're still going to go through it as if there is no bye week in between those two games, and that means we probably would have an extra week leading up to actual kickoff day later in the summer. But I'm happy to say we are finally caught up after this last week. It's been a lot of fun doing these episodes so far. I really hope you enjoyed last week's episode with USC and also the rest of them before that as well. But nonetheless, here we go with USC versus Oregon, UCLA versus Oregon in Countdown to Kickoff of this week's episode. Enjoy the show.
Foot race to their sideline. Touchdown, Oregon!
Now, the UCLA versus Oregon matchup isn't quite as cinematic as the USC versus Oregon matchups. Much less has been at stake over the years with these two teams meeting together. However, it has still been a mainstay matchup in the Pac Conference, dating all the way back to their first matchup in 1928 and all the way to their first matchup, both as members of the Big Ten Conference in 2024. But there also has been a few matchups in between then that did have a little bit of high stakes and also became instant classics in college football history, and we're going to look at those. If you didn't know and lived under a rock, LA in particular, but the Southern California region is a wealth of college football talent coming out of high school, and thus in the 80s and 90s, both teams out of Los Angeles were dominant programs. That included USC and also UCLA. UCLA in the 80s and 90s had 3 Rose Bowl victories from 83 to 86 and 4 straight bowl games after that, all the way until 1990. And in those years, it helped QB Troy Aikman, who was UCLA's QB in the late 80s, get picked number 1 overall by the Dallas Cowboys in 1989. Now, UCLA's Pac-10 and college football prominence carried into the 90s after Troy Aikman, which included an 8-game win streak throughout the decade against crosstown rivals, the USC Trojans. The Bruins were peaking as a program, and the Oregon Ducks were on a rise, trying to take the next step from the magical 1994 season, putting up a competitive 2-2 record against UCLA after the Ducks went 1-3 total in the 80s against the Bruins, mid-rebuild from the suffering. But it wasn't until 1998 that these two programs clashed at the right time.
You are looking live at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California. 2 unbeaten teams averaging 98 points a game between them come together. It's Oregon, UCLA. Get your calculators ready, everybody.
UCLA was at their peak as a program and riding the top of that wave of college football as they were ranked number 2 going into the Rose Bowl against the Ducks. 1998 was also the same year that the Ducks were trying to make a massive jump as a program, going from overachieving underdogs in 1994 to consistent competitors in 1998. Now, after the 94 season, Nike and specifically Phil Knight finally saw what might be possible for the Oregon Duck football program if you were to invest heavily in building that program. Now, 1998 was a few years after that 94 season, so the steps and the bricks being laid down by Phil Knight and Nike building that football program were starting to take place. And there were 2 JUCO transfer stars.
His name is Akili Smith. He is one of the biggest surprises in college football. Akili's the nation's top-ranked quarterback, and because of his strong right arm, Oregon is unbeaten.
But Reuben Drones averaged 200 yards per game as the leading rusher in junior college last.
Reuben Drones, the running back from Merced College, and Keely Smith, from Grossmont College down here in San Diego that helped set those expectations high. Also, on the flip side, being led by a relatively stout enough defense, those expectations were starting to build, and 1998 was going to be the season that Oregon would make a first sort of serious run at not only a BCS bowl game like a Fiesta Bowl or a Rose Bowl, but maybe even a national championship. And the 1998 Oregon UCLA game was the first test for both of these programs when they met in October. This was a prototypical Pac-10 showdown of offense led by Smith, Drones, and star QB and Oregon native Cade McNown on the Bruins. And it stayed that way despite a season-ending injury to Drones where he broke his fibula in the fourth quarter in the game. And that was after Drones had originally left the game due to an ankle issue in the second quarter. Despite an absolute nuts and guts performance by Ruben Drones, who, while injured, still ran for 172 yards, and Achilles Smith, who threw for 221 yards and 3 TDs, UCLA took this matchup 41-38 in a prototypical ESPN classic of a college football game. After this game, UCLA would go on to win 10 games and play Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl, where unfortunately they lost, and Oregon ended up in the Aloha Bowl. As it turned out, Ruben Drones was going to be out for the season. Since that 98 game, Oregon went 8-3 against the Bruins until the next big game, which was the first ever Pac-12 Conference Championship. 2011 was the inaugural year of the Pac-12 Conference, which meant two things. One, there was a conference championship game officially, and two, there were divisions due to the 12-team format of the conference. Oregon was the Northern Division champions, and UCLA were the Southern Division champions in 2011 when they met in Austin Stadium in November to kick off the first ever Pac-12 Conference Championship game. The pageantry of this game was mostly due to the fact that the conference had its first ever actual championship game, because otherwise the matchup was a little bit lopsided. Oregon was heavily favored, ranked at number 5 at the time, and UCLA was fighting for bowl eligibility and hoping to get lucky by winning this game and going to the Rose Bowl. Oregon had pretty good control of this game, with Darren Thomas going for 219 yards and 3 TDs thrown, and LaMichael James putting up a massive 219 yards rushing with 3 touchdowns in this game. The score was a little bit closer than the game actually signified, with Oregon winning 49-31 and eventually going on to play Wisconsin in the 2012 Rose Bowl, in which Oregon won the Rose Bowl in that game for the first time in 95 years since beating Penn State 14-7 in 1917. In a way, UCLA and Oregon does have an intertwined history, but it's more on the sidelines than on the playing field. At the moment of the 1998 game, Bob Toledo, head coach of the Bruins, was actually offensive coordinator at one point in the early to mid 80s for the Oregon Ducks. Alan Borges was offensive coordinator at Oregon a few years before heading to UCLA, and most notably legendary defensive coordinator for Oregon Ducks for many decades, Nick Aliotti, started his coaching career at Oregon and made a pit stop in Westwood for the 1998 season before returning back to Oregon for another decade and a half after that year in 1999. And even after that 1998 game, there was still more connections between Westwood and Eugene, where Chip Kelly spent some time head coaching the Bruins, coaching original Oregon recruit who flipped to UCLA, Dante Moore, who then transferred back to Oregon after his freshman year at UCLA and is the current starting quarterback for the Oregon Ducks in the 2025 season and this upcoming 2026 season. And even though UCLA has only beat Oregon once since the year 2008, they lead the overall series with 40 wins and 33 losses. We'll see what happens this upcoming year between these two teams.